was just another busy night at the restaurant, until one small moment froze the entire room. A black waiter stood there, holding a tray, while a customer with too much money and too much power made a choice that could have ended his career in seconds. But instead, something happened that no one in the room could have predicted. By the next evening, he wasn't wearing an apron. He was sitting in the manager's chair. What happened in those 24 hours that turned a man everyone overlooked into the one everyone answered to? It was just another Saturday night rush. Marcus Bennett, the only black waiter in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, moved through the maze of white tablecloths with quiet precision. He'd worked here for 3 years, long enough to know the regulars by their drinks, and long enough to know that in this place, people like him were expected to stay in the background. On the surface, Marcus's life was simple. Early shifts meant afternoons with his younger sister, late nights meant long subway rides home to a small apartment in Queens. He didn't complain. Hard work was what kept the lights on. But he'd also learned to swallow the sting of overheard comments, of patrons who refused his service, of managers who looked through him instead of at him. That night, though, something was different. An unexpected guest walked in. Someone with a name that carried weight far beyond the dining room walls. And within minutes, Marcus would find himself standing at the center of a moment that would test every unspoken rule in the room. A moment that would turn the quiet routine of his life into the start of something no one saw coming. The restaurant was buzzing with the quiet hum of wealth, hushed conversations over champagne, forks clinking against porcelain, the soft piano in the corner. Marcus moved between tables with the kind of grace you only learn from years of keeping your head down. He had just set down a plate of seared salmon when the atmosphere shifted. A man had entered with an air that made the entire room subtly lean in. Tall, silver hair, tailored suit, Elliot Carver. Real estate magnate, worth hundreds of millions, and a man known for remembering faces when they mattered to him. His table was ready before his coat even touched the rack. Marcus approached with the standard greeting, but Carver didn't look at him. Not once. Every order was directed to the white busboy at Marcus's side, as if Marcus were invisible. When Marcus poured his wine, Carver pulled the glass back slightly, his lips curling into something between a smirk and a warning. The message was clear: you're not the one who should be serving me. Still, Marcus kept his voice calm, his posture steady. This wasn't new. But then, midway through the meal, it escalated. A request came from Carver's table, urgent, according to the manager. The guest's son, a young man in his 20s with cerebral palsy, wanted to try the dessert trolley. The manager's tone carried weight when he added, "Marcus, just don't interact too much. Let someone else handle it." Marcus hesitated. This wasn't about dessert. He'd seen the way Carver's son looked at the trolley, the flicker of excitement. The kind Marcus remembered from his sister when she'd try something new. Against instructions, Marcus approached. He bent slightly, making eye-level contact with the young man, and spoke to him, not over him. He described each dessert in detail, letting the young man make the choice himself. It should have been a harmless gesture. But Carver's jaw tightened. The room seemed to shrink as the magnate's voice cut through the low chatter. "Do your job and keep it professional," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. The humiliation was deliberate. Marcus felt the sting, but he didn't step back. Instead, he stayed beside the young man until the dessert arrived, even adjusting the plate so it was easier to reach. Carver's glare followed him all the way to the kitchen. The manager cornered him moments later. Sharp words, veiled threats, the kind of warning you don't ignore if you want to keep your job. By the end of the night, Marcus was sure he'd just signed his own termination slip. But something happened after the last table cleared. Carver's son had refused to leave until Marcus came by to say goodbye. And when Marcus did, the young man smiled, a rare, genuine smile that caught the attention of someone powerful enough to change Marcus's life. The next morning, Marcus's phone rang. It wasn't his manager. It wasn't even the restaurant owner. It was Elliot Carver himself, inviting Marcus to meet him face to face. Marcus arrived at the downtown skyscraper expecting a private meeting in some sterile office. Instead, he was led into a boardroom, glass walls, skyline views, and half a dozen executives seated around a table. At the head sat Elliot Carver, his expression unreadable. Sit, Carver said, and for a moment, Marcus felt the weight of every eye on him. He didn't belong here. That was the unspoken message. Then Carver spoke, not to Marcus but to the room. Last night, one of my guests crossed a line. He disrespected a member of the staff based solely on appearance. He paused, letting the words hang. That staff member is sitting here. The silence was sharp enough to cut. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Carver's gaze finally met his. I built my empire on reading people, he said. And last night, I saw someone with more leadership in a single act than some of my managers show in a year. The room shifted. A few executives exchanged looks, surprise, maybe disapproval. Then one spoke, his tone dripping with condescension. With respect, sir, this is a fine dining establishment. Leadership is one thing. Optics are another. Marcus knew exactly what optics meant. The message was clear. He doesn't look the part. Carver didn't flinch. You're right, he said slowly. Optics matter. Which is why starting tonight, Marcus Bennett will not be wearing an apron. He'll be wearing a manager's badge. Gasps. Whispers. The kind of reaction you'd expect when an unspoken rule gets shattered in public. Marcus sat frozen, unsure if this was a setup, a test, or something real. And then Carver added the words that turned the room ice cold. If anyone here has a problem with that, you can hand me your resignation by the end of the day. Marcus's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of hearing his worth spoken aloud in a place where it had always been denied. But what he didn't know yet was that this promotion wasn't just about him. That night, Marcus walked into the restaurant without his apron. The same staff who once passed him orders without eye contact now greeted him with cautious nods. Some smiled. Others looked away. Change has a way of making people uncomfortable. His first act as manager wasn't to rewrite schedules or give orders. It was to stand beside the same young busboy who had watched Carver ignore him the night before. He made sure the kid knew his voice mattered. Word of the promotion spread quickly. For some, it was a feel-good story, a wealthy man doing the right thing. But Marcus knew it was more complicated. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was one small fracture in a wall that had been built over generations. Because the truth was, Marcus hadn't been promoted just for his skills. He had been promoted in spite of a system designed to overlook people like him. And for every Marcus who breaks through, countless others are still unseen, unheard, unrecognized. Weeks later, Carver's son visited again. This time, when Marcus approached, there was no hesitation, just a smile and a handshake. Carver stood a few steps back, watching. Not as a magnate, not as a man guarding his optics, but as a father who had begun to understand something money couldn't teach. Marcus had a title now, but what mattered most was the shift in the room, subtle but real. A reminder that dignity isn't given from above. It's claimed, moment by moment, even when no one's watching. So ask yourself, how many moments have passed by where you could have spoken up, could have challenged what was normal but stayed silent? And if the next 24 hours could change someone's life, would you take that chance? If this story made you stop and think, even for a moment, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with the moments in your life when you saw unfairness and what you did about it. And if you want more stories like this challenge how we see each other, make sure you're subscribed. Every view, every share, every conversation moves us one step closer to a world where dignity isn't a privilege. It's the starting point.